All right, welcome back, Power Zone Sports Podcast. All right, you just heard the Alabama side of things as we approach the college football playoff with Chris Stewart. Now we're going to the opposite game number 2 in the Sugar Bowl, Texas, Washington on Monday night on the 1st. Going to talk to Eric Henry, beat reporter for Horns 247 and CBS Sports. He covers the Longhorns every single day, and he is joining us to preview a little Texas Washington. Welcome in, Mr. Henry.
Jason, long time no see, man. Happy to jump on with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining us. Eric's a Tampa guy along with me as well. So, and we got the connections here. Obviously, Michael Penix, quarterback from Washington, is a Tampa guy. So I know Eric knows of Mr. Penix and quite well. So we're going to get into the matchup a little bit. First and foremost, give me a little sense of signing day for the Horns. Obviously, just passed a few days ago. Is Sark and the staff pretty excited about what they got coming in?
Oh yeah, listen, it's funny, as we're recording this right now, some things are still going on in flux. Just check my phone here to see what's the latest on a couple guys. Looks like Aaron Hampton, a four-star former commit or former verbal commit, has just flipped to Alabama. So we'll see about that one. Of course, the big one for Texas, the 5-star recruit wide receiver Ryan Wingo from St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis High School there. We'll have to see where he lands because he was a Missouri commit for a long time. Then Texas made that push and he flipped to Texas, and now Nebraska. Of course, they got Dylan Raiola, the 5-star recruit, #1 rated quarterback in the nation. So he's making a push as well to get him a little receiving target there in Nebraska. We'll see how that lands. But all in all, take those guys out of the equation. Still a lot of promise there in Austin. It really starts with Colin Simmons, 6'2", 225-pound edge player, someone who they're really looking to pair with Anthony Hill Jr., last year's prize recruit at linebacker. Someone who's the Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year. Just looking to really bolster that defensive line as far as having pass rushers that are SEC ready. And I'll give you a guy to keep an eye on, but I think it's going a little bit under the radar, is Adrian Santana Wilson. If that name sounds familiar, he's the son of former Arizona Cardinal safety Adrian Wilson, who I believe is the general manager for the Cardinals, if memory serves me correct. I know he's
I think
somewhere in the front office. Yeah, but they got him from Arizona, a standout ball hawk back there. And especially at a spot at safety that for Texas, they're going to have some guys moving on. A veteran in Jaron Thompson is moving on. They lost Jalen Catalon in the transfer portal. So going to be some spots, some opportunities for some high-profile guys, some high-profile recruits to really step up and make an impact. And if you take a look at this year's roster, Sark has not been afraid to play young guys. I think that's been the biggest thing. Each program, Jason, talks about wanting to out-recruit the previous class, right? And Texas certainly has done that. But the thing with Steve Sarkisian, he's been adamant, like, hey, if those guys, we have a dedicated progression plan for them. If these guys follow that progression plan, they might not open the year as a starter, but by week 5, week 6, week 7, similar to what we saw with Anthony Hill, they'll be playing starters reps and have an opportunity to make an impact.
Year 3 of Sark. Talk about how has Sark fully been embraced by the Texas community as far as we know what kind of pressure there is to win at that job. Talk about how Sark, the first 2 years he probably lost more games than they thought they would lose. Talk about how year 3 has really solidified Sark's stature there with the Texas community.
Not even just year 3, the Alabama win. That was the moment that really helped put 5-7 year 1 behind them. And I think gave the players on this roster more than anything else the confidence that if they buy into Sark's messaging, buy into his program, and a lot of it, Jason, it's going to sound cliche, but we ask the guys each week. I mean, I'll give you a story from Big 12 media days. We asked veterans like Jordan Whittington and Jahdae Barron and others, like, what's different about this year's Texas team, the one that has the preseason expectations of being picked to win the Big 12? What's different about this team compared to previous teams? And Jay Witt and Jahdae said, listen, the bond that we have off the field is different. And, being my first year on the beat, it's like, okay, that's kind of a cliche answer. But Jason, you saw the almost bizarre comments from the the Iowa State offensive lineman, Jared Hufford, talking about 5-star talent versus 5-star culture and taking the Breeze Hall quote to another level, saying those guys aren't ready for what we're going to show them at Iowa State. Texas took that personally. And we've talked with players from previous Big 12 teams who said, yeah, you would face Texas in the past. And if you got them down and maybe, they missed an assignment on a run play, they'd start pointing at each other and be like, what were you doing? As opposed to trying to pick each other up. That's been one of the biggest differences is to togetherness that again was amplified by the Alabama win. Sark has this thing called Culture Wednesdays, in which he's had the entire team from himself, position coaches, players, just share things about each other's life that in his mind is like, hey, how can you really get to know that person and want to fight for that person on Saturdays if you don't know that person aside from the football field? And those things Jason really manifested in numerous times. We hear from the wide receiver group or the DB room saying we watch film at the facility, and then we go to Jade Barron's apartment or we go to Jordan Williams' apartment and we just watch film there too, because we want to take it on ourselves to be the group that kind of brings Texas back to where it needs to be. So that's kind of a bit of a long-winded answer, but it's all those things that have really kind of made up the belief and buy-in for Sark, and it really culminated with that Alabama win.
And the stigma that Texas had to live with the last 10 or 15 years, that they've always had good players. They always get the high profile guys from all over the state of Texas, and got guys they want to get. But the physicality that they've now developed, the offensive and defensive line, the toughness, and you saw that in the Alabama game. They were the better team physically in the Alabama game. They've been the better team. I've seen Texas play several times. The physicality that they're able to show in the trenches has really been impressive to me, and I think has really launched them to be able to overcome the adversity of maybe not playing as great as they want to play against a Wyoming or struggling against Rice and those kinds of things. Just talk about how the physicality has really, really defined itself in this Texas team.
Yeah, I'll give you two guys. It's Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. And I don't know if you've ever seen those guys, Jason, but 6'4", 362 Tavondre Sweat, a man who, when you get him away from the field, a jokester. I mean, Tavondre can be one of the most affable, like quick-witted guys you come across. But when you come across him on game days, that man is a menace. And the same thing goes for Byron Murphy, who's 6'1", 305 pounds, but widely known as the strongest guy on the football team. They set the tone. Those are the tone setters that, hey, you're not going to run against us. It's the #1 run defense in the Big 12, #3 in the nation. We're going to set the tone. And that's that attitude, that sense of swagger has really translated itself throughout the entire defense. And then to an offensive line that, as you talked about, Jason, had some ups and downs in the early part of the year, but took it on themselves to say, hey, we lost our 5-star running, our 1,200-yard rusher in Jonathan Brooks. And we have a running back now, a freshman, a former 5-star recruit in C.J. Baxter, who we got to help him out. He's not the same type of running back as Jonathan Brooks, who has that veteran savvy, that experience in terms of, making something out of nothing. We got to help him. We got to set the tone. And they've done an excellent job up front of springing not only him, but underclassmen like Jaden Blue and Savion Red and others. So just everything starting with that interior defensive line of being the face and the tone setters of that team. Again, I just can't come back to that Iowa State game enough. When Jared Hufford made those comments, we asked Steve Sarkisian postgame, why did you make Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy captains? And he said, I wanted those guys to go look them in the face and say, you challenge our culture. Now that's what you got to face. And everything starts with them, and it trickles down through the entire roster.
Let's go to the couple matchups in the game that obviously are going to be critical in determining the outcome here. Obviously, from a defensive perspective, you're going to face Michael Penix, who you know well, left-handed quarterback. Going to be a first-round draft pick. You got 3 pro receivers at Washington. Odunze is the main guy, but they've got 3-4 guys that will be playing on Sundays. How will Texas handle those matchups in the passing game, where Texas has been a little vulnerable in the secondary potentially? How do you think Texas is going to handle those 3 wide receivers and keeping Michael Penix under wraps?
Jason, if Washington's going to win this game, it's going to come down to Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk and others being able to win their matchup. So I'll kind of bring you inside a little bit here. Here's something that if I were, a fan of both teams, but especially for Washington, I'd keep my eye on. The safety room for Texas is depleted. So Derek Williams Jr. and Michael Taft are going to be the main 2 safeties. And this year, Texas has rotated 5 safeties: Derek Williams Jr., Michael Taft, Jaron Thompson, Jalen Catalon, and Keaton Crawford. Jalen Catalon chose to enter the transfer portal, so he's no longer with the program. Derek Williams Jr. was hit with a targeting call in the Oklahoma State game, and he's going to miss the first half of the Washington game. So, in some senses, you kind of look at it and say, all right, it's only 2 quarters. You still have 3 of your safeties, but you're talking about a very potent offense in Washington that they can make 2 quarters. That can be 21, 28 points right there. So How can they fare? It's going to come down to guys like Ryan Watts, who's one of the better cornerbacks in my mind in the Big 12, and a very talented true freshman in Malik Muhammad. How can those guys win their matchups? What we're seeing or hearing from bowl practices is Jahdae Barron, who's been their nickelback, a very talented nickelback, a guy who earned a Senior Bowl invite and is probably going to, be drafted as a nickelback. I mean, again, we're Tampa guys, so I liken him to the best nickelback in the history of the position, Rondé Barber, someone who's very instinctive like that. But they're looking to take him out of that position and possibly move him back to safety just because they need to compensate for the fact that they're going to be really only 3 deep at that position until the second half. How will that matchup look, Jason? Because Jahdae's value, while he can play corner, safety, nickel, his value at nickel is tremendously higher than my mind at other spots. And
Right.
Do you get the most value out of him by trying to put him at safety and compensate for the loss for 2 quarters? We'll see. But that's the matchup in my mind. Washington with Michael Penix and those receivers, really challenging those safeties that those 3 guys, especially without Derek Williams, those safeties have kind of been struggling in coverage over the past few weeks.
And Washington's is not they'll throw some screens, but they like to throw the ball down the field. They're going to throw deep routes, over routes, corner routes, long pass routes, which goes back to the physicality of the defensive line. Can the defensive line of Texas put the pressure on Penix not to give them that 3 or 4 seconds so those routes can develop down the field? How do you think that matchup, defensive line versus the Washington offensive line?
The thing about Texas, again, when I talk about Devondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, what's made the life difficult for opposing quarterbacks is any quarterback will tell you don't want to get pressured up the middle. And they've had the ability to do that. And even when Devondre isn't getting to the quarterback, he's eaten up 2, 3 offensive linemen to where it's guys like Anthony Hill, it's Barron Sorrell, it's Ethan Burke and others who are getting to the quarterback. So everything starts with them. I think, again, for someone who may not have watched Texas this year, don't be fooled by the fact that some of their edge guys don't have the highest of sack numbers. It's because everything starts with the inside, and then a guy here, a Jet Bush, or Chris Ross or Justice Finkley, guys who are specified edge rushers on third downs will come in and kind of make their plays. So they open up everything, and how will they be able to fare against that Washington offensive line? Quite frankly, I think they're going to do what they've done against every offensive line this year. But again, we'll have to see how that matchup really kind of shakes out on New Year's night.
An interesting part of this is Penix doesn't want to scramble to run. He wants to scramble to throw. He's not a big runner. He's not going to use his legs a ton. He wants to scramble to throw the ball down the field. And again, that's part of that up the middle pressure is to get him uncomfortable. He doesn't want people around his knees and his legs. Remember, Penix has had 2 knee injuries, so right. He doesn't want to stand in there and be running. He's not going to be running. He's going to run to throw as opposed to run to run. So, all right, let's flip it over to the Texas offense against a vulnerable defense. I think Texas, you've outlined Quinn Ewers. They've got some receivers, Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell. Talk about the offensive approach of Sark versus this Washington defense.
Steve Sarkisian is going to look to jump on Washington early. That's been the approach that's worked for them. Quite frankly, I mean, even going back to after the Oklahoma loss, one of the things that was really kind of gave you question marks about this Texas team was 3 games: Kansas State, Houston, TCU. They go up in the first halves of those games by 20 points in each game. It was the fact that they couldn't close them out. Those games ended up being very narrow wins for Texas because of the fact that they allowed those teams to come back in. A part of that was offensive, inadequacy in the second half. And part of that was the defense getting challenged. And some teams, just especially that Texas secondary, really being challenged to defend for 4 quarters. Right now, the fact that they've been able to really kind of put together their best ball games against Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, where that started on the offensive side, is looking to jump out on teams early. I said this on the previous show, but especially not having Jonathan Brooks. I think in my mind, that's really forced Steve Sarkisian's hand to say, okay, we don't have a running back that's going to ease us into the game, a guy who's going to get 60, 70 yards in the first half, and then we can kind of close them out in the second half and be a second half team. No, we need to go out there, establish early leads, and really jump on teams. So what that's looked like, especially in the Oklahoma State game, has been Quinn Ewers getting the ball out of his hands quickly into the hands of his playmakers. Xavier Worthy, a guy with legit 4.2 speed. A.D. Mitchell, a 6'3", 205-pound wideout who is one of the better deep threats for Texas. Jordan Whittington, the reliable slot receiver. And they have a great tight end in Jatavian Sanders, a very athletic matchup, a very a big guy at 6'4", 245 pounds who will provide mismatches for any linebacker or secondary he's going against. So I look for the game plan, Steve Sarkisian, someone who really heavily scripts his first 20 to 25 plays. They're going to look to go out there and jump on guys. And I would say, if we're taking 25 plays, I'd expect it to be 2/3 pass, them really looking to try to jump on this Washington secondary that struggled.
And Washington's rated in the 90s in pass defense nationally. Texas is in the top 10 nationally in pass offense. So I think you're going to probably put the ball in Ewers' hands early to see if they can cover those receivers. And again, Ewers is an experienced guy. He's been in that system a couple years now. Talk about, and a little subtle little thing is, fans, Malik Murphy, the backup quarterback at Texas, no longer with the program. He's in the transfer portal. So Arch Manning is the number 2. God forbid something happened to Ewers, Arch Manning would then elevate to the number 2 guy there. Talk about a couple more things. We'll get you out of here. Talk about Sark. Again, these national championship semifinal games, you typically see matchups, trick plays. I would anticipate there be a trick play, a double reverse, a double pass, something like that in this kind of game, especially out of Sark, because we know the creative mind that he is offensively. Do you anticipate there being some wrinkles formationally or schematically with the offense with all this time off that they've had for about 3.5 weeks or so?
It's possible. I mean, I think, the biggest trick play you've kind of seen is usually trying to get in the ball in Xavier Worthy's hands and allow him to throw. He's been able to do that a couple times this year. But in my mind, I just think, again, especially with the fact that you don't have Jonathan Brooks to lean on, a lot of what Sark is going to do is just the things that get the ball out of Quinn Ewers' hands quickly. And I don't want to reduce Quinn to, I know it's a dirty word, but game manager, right? Quinn is a guy who can make all the throws. But when you have a Xavier Worthy who operates so well over the middle of the field, someone who the entire reason they wanted an A.D. Mitchell from Georgia is so that you didn't have to force the ball to Xavier Worthy down the field all the time. It could be, hey, go run a comeback. Here's the ball. Go make a man miss and take it 30 yards to the house. Or here's a screen pass. Or here's a tunnel screen, right? Those things, especially with JT Sanders as well. I look at him to be just a pivotal mismatch, someone that they like to run tight end screens and things of that nature. So sure, Sark absolutely is a creative mind. I'm sure he'll have a couple wrinkles in there if needed. If things are really humming, right? We did see that against Oklahoma State. When things are really humming offensively, he can get creative. But I think the big thing he's going to want to do is just really dedicate a game plan that gets the ball out of Quinn's hands quickly, it puts the pressure on those Washington defensive backs to cover, something that they've struggled to do all year. Make them cover. Make them make an open field tackle against a guy like Xavier Worthy or A.D. Mitchell. That's what I'm expecting more than anything else.
Last thing, obviously Sark and DeBoer, both first-time playoff participants as head coaches. Sark has obviously been there with Alabama as the OC. Are both of these programs, is Texas in particular, are they ready for this moment? Do they firmly believe they can win 2 more games as far as win this game and then potentially then beat Michigan or Alabama again? Or does Sark maybe think he's a year ahead of schedule? Where does Sark think this team is as far as ready to win a national title?
No, with Texas, it's really interesting, Jason, because again, there was the cautious optimism heading into the year, right? Because Texas fans have been burned so many times before about, is Texas back? But this roster is loaded. This roster has 3 All-Americans, multiple all Big 12 performers. This roster entering this year, especially the best case scenario, outside of, I would say this, if Jonathan Brooks were healthy, then you really feel confident, hey, we're probably among it's us in Michigan in my mind. But even without Jonathan Brooks, you take a look at how Anthony Hill has progressed. You take a look at how some of the young guys, Malik Muhammad and others, have come along. And this roster has all of the talent. Let's just take a look at the 4 teams in the college football playoff. I don't see a definitive edge from Washington over Texas. I look at that to be a 50-50 ball game, and one that I probably would lean more towards Texas. Texas has beaten Alabama this year, albeit sure, not the same Alabama, not the same Jalen Milroe who has progressed, but they can at least go into a potential matchup with Alabama with confidence that we've beaten them. Mm-hmm. And now we'll get them on a neutral field. If not, you get them in Houston, probably lean a little more Texas-wise. In Michigan, I'd say that's the main one that you say, okay, maybe they've looked quote unquote head and shoulders better than everyone else. But even Michigan at times has been tested. So I think there's all the reason in the world to believe that Texas this year, their roster is living up to the potential it came into the year. And then sure, maybe a year ahead of schedule in the sense that they're having such success heading into the SEC. This isn't what some people expected, especially when you look at the history of teams that have left and gone to the SEC, right? Texas A&M, Missouri, and others. So, yeah, that sense, no, I think this team expects to win, and I give them a very, very fair shot, especially against Washington, and we'll see what happens after that.
Eric Henry, enjoy your coverage of the Texas-Washington game. Eric's going to be in New Orleans a couple of days after Christmas, all throughout the week leading up to the New Year's night battle in New Orleans in the Superdome. Tell everybody where they can find all your great work online, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Eric C. Henry _. You can find my coverage of the Longhorns at Horns 24/7, 24/7 Sports, and CBSSports.com.
Don't get in too much trouble on Bourbon Street now. I don't want to see you I don't want to see you in the blogs, okay?
Hey, we're not going to have one of those. What was it? Miami and the Gators from back in the day, right? We're not going to have any of that. I would be low key. Just enjoy some food. That's all.
Enjoy New Orleans. Enjoy the title game, and good luck to the Horns. And we will talk soon, man. I appreciate the time.
Hey, anytime, Jason. My man. My pleasure.
You got it. All right, we'll be right back on the Powers on Sports podcast.